Hi, this is Professor Patrick Martin again, and we're going to continue our discussion on fiscal policy. So last time we explained what expansionary and contractionary fiscal policy was and what conditions would lead the government of Canada to pursue either policy. And what we're going to do now is we're going to graphically illustrate what happens in an aggregate demand, aggregate supply model when fiscal policy is employed. And we'll begin by talking about expansionary fiscal policy. And let's draw a aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve that represents that situation. We'll put price denoted by P on the vertical axis, and we'll use put real income or real GDP denoted by a Y on the horizontal axis. We'll have our downward sloping aggregate demand curve, a upward sloping aggregate supply curve. Let's just make that a little bit darker if we can. And the equilibrium level of income is going to be less than potential output in the economy denoted by Y sub P on the horizontal axis, and this vertical line is the long-run aggregate supply curve that the economy will naturally tend to over time. So at an output level that's less than its potential level, the economy is likely in a recession. We have high unemployment, certainly greater than frictional and structural unemployment together. So we have some cyclical unemployment, not too much pressure on the price level, and economic growth is probably not so great. The government of Canada could use fiscal policy or monetary policy or a combination of both to try to increase aggregate demand to pull the economy out of this recession and to, importantly, to lower the unemployment rate. Fiscal policy, if chosen, would occur by increasing government spending, reducing taxation, and hence increasing disposable incomes for households, or a combination of both. And what would happen in that situation is that the aggregate demand curve would shift to the right. Okay, at every price level, we would have more aggregate demand. And if the government of Canada is lucky or does its homework, the shift in aggregate demand will just be that amount that reestablishes equilibrium in the economy at the potential level of output in the economy. Not so easy to do, okay? In part because there are some lags to fiscal policy. So, by government spending, that could, an increase in government spending might be new roads, new ports, new telecommunication infrastructure, a whole number of things that take time to build and for the results to be felt by the economy. This picture here is it would be a very lucky occurrence if the increase in aggregate demand that came about because of an increase in government spending was just the right amount to reestablish equilibrium at the potential level of output in the economy. So this is expansionary fiscal policy. Let's take a look at contractionary fiscal policy. And we'll move over and once again draw a pair of axes with the price level P on the vertical axis and real GDP or income denoted by capital Y on the horizontal axis. We'll draw our aggregate supply curve, the upward sloping curve, and an aggregate demand curve, a downward sloping curve. We have equilibrium at some level of output. And in this case, that short-run equilibrium will be above the potential level of output in the economy, and that vertical line at the potential level of output is the long-run aggregate supply curve, and we'll just denote that by a capital LRAS. In this situation, the economy is overheated. Output is above its potential level. Unemployment is less than the combination of frictional and structural unemployment. There's very few people that are unemployed in the economy. So much so that it's hard for firms to hire new workers. And that places upward pressure on wages, and that in turn results in higher prices for goods that consumers purchase in the economy. So we're going to have some considerable inflationary pressures if output is currently well above potential level of output in the economy. Governments are rightly concerned about inflationary pressures, and the appropriate policy response here is to use contractionary fiscal policy, which is to reduce government spending or to increase taxes in the economy, thereby reducing disposable income, both of which will result in a reduction in aggregate demand. Again, if the government gets a little lucky, that reduction in aggregate demand that results from that reduction in government spending or increase in taxation will be such that the new equilibrium level of output is actually at the potential level of GDP in the economy. More likely, it'll still be either above the potential level of output, or maybe we overshoot and push the economy into an economic slowdown if we have increased taxes by too much or reduced government spending by too much. And there might have to be a continuation of government intervention in the economy before we actually get back to that potential level of output in the economy. And at that point, we could see sustained economic growth as the potential level of output increases in the economy over time due to increases in infrastructure, capital stock, or labor force, or improvements in technology. This potential level of output is actually not a stationary vertical line. It's almost always slowly moving to the right. So in your textbook readings and in the instructor or commentator, we actually talk about a dynamic version of the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, but we're not going to try to do it here in this short video tutorial. So expansionary fiscal policy, increasing government spending, reducing taxation to shift the aggregate demand curve out to try to get to a higher equilibrium level of income. We do suffer some increase in the price level by doing that. Or contractionary fiscal policy, reducing government spending, increasing taxation, shifting aggregate demand to the left, downwards, that lowers the equilibrium level of income, and it also reduces the pressure on the price level that we were experiencing when the income level was greater than at its potential level. That concludes this part of our discussion on fiscal policy. We will come back in just a moment and we'll provide an algebraic discussion of fiscal policy for you.